Hi, I'm Terrence. Today I'm going to talk about my project. The topic is about the rivalry over standard language in China, Korea, and Vietnam. The reason why I chose this topic is because I've always been interested and curious about the phenomenon of dialect, or 方言in Chinese term. First of all, I have to clarify that 方言 is not equal to dialect. 方言 is actually an abbreviation for 地方语言, which means regional language, and some scholars call it regionalect, because the Chinese sense of 方言 is somewhere in between dialect and language, or sometimes could range between dialect and language in the Western sense. As I was doing the research on this topic about Chinese 方言, I found a good book introducing Cantonese and the development of its vernacular written form. The author, Don Snow, put the linguistic situation of Hong Kong in a broader context of diglossia, which is a very common phenomenon in southern China, where people speak their native 方言but read and write in standard Chinese. Hong Kong is a really unique place in the sense that it is the only place in China that you will regularly encounter the written form of a Chinese 方言. That's a characteristic that sets Hong Kong apart from other parts of China, where people also speak a colloquial language different from Mandarin. In fact, there were attempts to develop a written form for other Chinese 方言, like Wu near Shanghai and Southern Min in Taiwan, but none of them were as successful as the development of written Cantonese in Hong Kong. We know it's a natural tendency for people to write what you speak, but it's never fully achieved in the Chinese-speaking world. Then let's shift our focus to Cantonese itself. So first of all, I have to mention that the widespread popularity of Cantonese, apart from Hong Kong, has to do a lot with their early migration to other countries by sea. Before the opening up of China during the past 40 years, Cantonese-speaking Chinese actually took up the majority of overseas Chinese in the West. That's why Cantonese was the Chinese that was spoken mostly in most Chinatowns in the West. Cantonese is no doubt the most influential Chinese 方言in modern times. And of course, if we don't count Mandarin as a 方言, because Mandarin is a standard language in the Chinese-speaking world. Now the question really comes to who decided or what factors has affected the rivalry over standard language in China. In the case of China and the greater Chinese-speaking world, there are several factors. First, China has a long tradition of setting the language spoken in the capital city as the standard language. Second, Beijing was the capital in Qing dynasty for the last few hundreds of years. Third, by the beginning of last century, people speaking various dialects of Mandarin as their mother tongue took up the vast majority of overall Chinese population. Therefore, it seems obvious and reasonable to make Mandarin the standard language of China. But what about the rivalry over standard language in Sino-Sinic countries? So now let's turn our attention into Korea. The source about Korea that I'm using is a book chapter written by Ruskin, and thank you, Scott, for recommending the source to me. The issue being addressed here is a controversy over correct spelling, or in another word, orthography, in Korea between the dominant central Seoul dialect and the Pyongan dialect of the Northwest. So here are some key arguments and contents that of this article that I've summarized, including some Ping'an Korean's orthographic fundamentalism based on Sejong's original and correct sound, and the topic of script nationalism as a significant part of modern Korean identity. And in this case, the rivalry is not about standard language, but the standard orthography, which became the manifestation of linguistic nationalism and regionalism. I found it very interesting because in some ways, Ping'an dialect in northwest Korea shares some similarities with Cantonese in the Chinese context. What I mean by this is that, for example, both Ping'an dialect speakers and Cantonese speakers believe and take pride in the idea that their dialect or fangyan have kept the correct pronunciation of the past, and their dialects have fewer homonyms compared to the Seoul dialect of Korean and Beijing Mandarin. Moreover, both Ping'an province and the Cantonese-speaking region were kind of a peripheral area in two countries, not very close to the central core region of Korea and China. In fact, the rise of Pyongyang and Pearl River Delta were both a result of strong Western influence during the past few centuries. Their status as great trading ports opened up a new page for the future of these two regions. In the case of Northwest Korea, it was the dissemination and popularity of Christianity that, to some extent, empowered Ping'an province and its dialect in Korea in this correct spelling campaign with Seoul dialect in the 1930s. So we can see some clear signs of regional identity intertwined with language ideologies in both cases. The sense of pride and uniqueness that Ping'an dialect speakers and Cantonese speakers have about their mother tongue is strengthened by claiming the legitimacy of their way of speaking Korean and Chinese. My third source is regarding the issue of standard language and politics in another Sino-Xenic country, Vietnam. The author, Andrea Ho Pham, started her discussion on a series of related issues based on the question, which Vietnamese dialect should we teach in North American classrooms? So similar to Korean vernacular movement, Vietnam also abandoned the use of Chinese characters, as well as their vernacular script, inspired by Chinese characters, Chunam. The alphabetic nature of modern Vietnamese script has also posed controversies over what is the correct spelling and orthography in Vietnam, just like the case in Korea. As people from South Vietnam account for the majority of overseas Vietnamese population, people speaking a northern dialect are usually in a complicated situation. The good aspect of this is that their northern dialect is generally considered as the standard Vietnamese, even in the mind of people from the south as well. But the stereotype that comes with it is the connection between their dialect and communism, which is something that people from the south are traumatized, therefore extremely sensitive about. The status of Northern Hanoi dialect of Vietnamese is indeed in such an awkward position outside of Vietnam, Although it historically and currently has been the standard and correct dialect from the origin of Vietnamese people, the Red River Delta. The political divide and bitter memory of war in the last century has stigmatized the northern dialect, making it the standard but communist Vietnamese in overseas Vietnamese diasporas. So, in conclusion, history, politics, and the interest of majority are some of the defining factors in the rivalry over standard language or correct orthography in East Asian countries. And pure linguistic aspects, such as numbers of homonyms and the unambiguity of the language, played less significant roles in the decision on standard language. And third, language, dialects, and orthography are often mixed with, or either deliberately or passively being the carriers of political ideologies, nationalism, regional identity, and pride. So that's my bibliography, and thank you.